Okay, so the next section I wanted to quickly review, because you guys should be really good at this, is solving by factoring. So I wrote some problems here, and I want to just quickly refresh your memory. You notice that the first two have no a, which means we can solve them we can factor them the short way, which is really nice. And we notice that these two do have an a, so I wanted to review that as well. Okay, so to solve by factoring, when we look at this problem, we say to ourselves, there's no a, so we can do it the short way. We take c. Remember, this is in standard form, so the coefficient of x squared is a, the coefficient of x is b, and the c is the constant, the guy on the end. So we're going to take c. It doesn't really matter so much if you make it a negative or positive here, and then we're going to list the factors. 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and then remember the short way, we're going to come back to that in a second. And the short way, you can go straight into your answer, which is what's really nice. And you start off, since you have x squared there, you make that x. Remember, because this is negative, it tells you that your signs are going to be different. So one of these is going to be positive, one is going to be negative. It doesn't really matter which is which for right now. Okay, so let's go back and look at our factors. We're looking at which combination is going to get us to a -3. We know that our signs are different, and we know that the larger number has to be negative. So which of these combinations is going to get us to -3? It's right here. So my 5 has to go with a negative, and my positive has to go with the 2. From this point, since I'm trying to solve, I'm going to use the zero product property. So I'm going to set each of those parentheses equal to 0, and then solve it. Add 5 to both sides. Subtract 2 from both sides. So that's your solution. You know that this parabola is a smiley face because this is positive, and it is going through the x-axis at -2, -2 and 5. But you're just going to have to do this part. Okay, so let's look over at the second example. Go ahead, and I can do it the short way. This tells me the signs are the same as each other, and they're whatever this guy is. So they're going to be positives. I list my factors I list my c over here, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Everything's positive. Which combination is going to get me to 5? 2 and 3. Set them equal to 0. Zero product property. And those are my solutions. Okay, so let's go over what to do if we have an a, because then we have to do this the long way. So I'm going to multiply my a times my c. Now I can't go straight into my parentheses. That's what I could do the short way when I didn't have an a. So I have to do the similar process where I list all the factors, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. This tells me my signs are different. The larger one is negative. Which combination is going to get me to -5? This one. So now I have to rewrite so that there is 4 terms. And remember, I'm always going to put my negative first. It just makes it a little bit easier if I do it that way. Okay, so -6x plus x gets me -5x. So I've just rewritten that. Now I'm going to split it down the middle. My GCF here is 2x. I don't have a GCF, but I must pull something out, so I'm just going to factor out a 1. Remember, these will always be the same. And then I put the guys on the outside together and the guys on the inside together. Those are going to be the same, so that'll be there. So now I have to use the zero product property. Okay, when I solve this, just like a normal equation, subtract 1 from both sides. Divide by 2. So x equals -1/2. And x equals 3. All right, here's another example of one that you have to factor out the long way. If this was a 10 or something, then I could divide everything by 2 because it was a GCF, but because there's no GCF here, then I have to go ahead and factor it. If you guys want to freeze, you can go ahead and do it, and then just check your work in a second. Okay, I'm just going to do the work. All right, so that was my work pretty quickly. I want to talk to you guys about the zero product property. Remember, it might look confusing, but this is just the bottom part. Like up here, once you got to this part, you use the zero product property. So at this point, you would just set each of them equal to 0. And solve them. Remember, this works because what you're saying is you're multiplying two numbers. You're multiplying this parentheses times this parentheses, and it has to equal 0. So basically, one of them has to equal 0. So if we set this guy equal to 0 and solve it, then we know when we multiply 0 times something else, it's going to get 0. Or we set this equal to 0, and then if that equaled 0, we multiply it by something else that also equals 0. Now this one over here, it looks a little different, but it's the same thing. You're basically saying this times this. So you have to set this equal to 0 and this equal to 0. All right, it doesn't matter if it's outside on the parentheses, that's okay. All right, divide both sides by -3, so I still get 0 here. All right, so those are my two solutions, saying that x goes through 0 and x goes through -1/2. All right, so that is solving by factoring. Hopefully you were able to breeze through that because we've done it quite a few times.